Great talk, Ankit, Christina, and Dara. That was awesome. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Let me go do that. Okay, get this in. All right, should be fine. So today I'm going to share a little bit about the work that we've been doing to integrate with AWS Lake Formation. I think in the time that I have left, I'll keep this kind of pretty to the point. I'll basically start off and introduce Lake Formation in case the audience, I'm not sure where the audience is in terms of that, just give a brief introduction there, and then kind of dig in a little bit into what the integration is. And then at the end, I'll show a demo of the functionality that we built. So Lake Formation was basically built to help folks stand up data lakes faster. AWS was finding more and more folks want to build data lakes, but it was taking a significant amount of time. And so they've really released Lake Formation with a few things in mind. The top one being making it easy and quick to build data lakes. They've added a security piece to it, being able to define policies and authorization on data catalog resources. This is actually the core of our integration, really focusing on this piece. And they've done some great work to make it very easy to discover and share data throughout the organization. There's many different ways that you can actually deploy your data lakes, and you can actually have cross-catalog sharing and things like that. So we've been working with AWS over a series of months on this. So like I mentioned, in particular, the particular feature set that we were interested in, and then we've heard a lot of folks in the community and customers wanting, is fine-grained permissions, essentially. So in this figure that I have here, you can see, you have database level and table level, which is pretty common, I would say. I think the ones that are less would be column level security, so restricting access to what columns are visible or denied based on the user, and row level and even cell level security. So being able to define those policies and then taking advantage of those policies when a particular user makes a query. Again, this is just, most folks that kind of build data lakes are very familiar with this concept. Essentially, you have to have a data catalog that maps the schema of whatever your files are. In AWS, the storage itself is S3 and the data catalog is Glue. So Lake Formation works very directly with Glue and S3. The particular way it does that is it takes care of a lot of the credentials for you. Without using Lake Formation, a lot of the permissions, if you were to try to manage it, you would have to do it through IAM. Lake Formation completely simplifies that, allowing you to define policies, and then it takes care of the right permissions you need, both at the catalog level, which is Glue, as well as the actual storage level, which is S3. And I'll talk a little bit about this. They do this through a Credential Vending API, essentially, that they released recently. So how do you define the policies in Lake Formation? There's pretty much two ways. On the left-hand side is a very traditional way where you have a principal and then you map the principal to a particular resource. And obviously on top of that, you would define what actions or permissions they have. So for example, on the left-hand side, you can see, principal 1 has access to database A, table A.1, A.2, etc. The other way you can do it is tag-based access control, essentially. And so on your catalog resources, you would define tags. You can tag things, and there are certain inheritance properties. So for example, if I tagged database A in the picture with sales, then the tables itself get that. And then from there, you then associate access via the tags. So in this case, for example, principal 1 has access to the sales tag or the customers tag. And now whatever resource is tagged that, you have the permissions associated. So this shows the mapping between the principals and the resources. And then obviously the final thing is, well, what is the set of actions that you can do? So this is pretty straightforward. These are typical permissions you would see in most relational database systems, right? So you have database level things, alter, drop, grantable permissions, and at the table, whether you can select, insert, delete, drop, things like So like I mentioned, really recently at the last reInvent, they really went GA on this stuff. Particularly role level security was of interest, and we've been working with them as they were developing it. And I think it's been in preview, but really kind of it went really GA just within the last 2 months. So that's what we did. Now that it's GA, the SDKs are GA. Essentially, we've made it so that when you run a query inside Presto that's managed by Ahana, it can take advantage of the authorization policies that are defined in Lake Formation, which then obviously works with Glue and S3, and all those policies are then enforced in your query. And I will show this in the demo. So a little bit more details around this. So first, how you need to map. So when you're in a Presto cluster, you have a notion of a user. You need to map that user to an IAM principal. So that's one thing that we ended up having to do is, you have a bunch of users that are part of your clusters that can obviously authenticate to the cluster. We provide a mapping to say this particular user can assume effectively this role in AWS, which then serves as your principal. And then once you have the AWS principal or role, you have all the permissions that role has defined. So in this particular example, and I'll use the exact same users in my demo, you can have an admin, you can have persona-based roles, everything that you would normally do to define roles in AWS, you can leverage here. One level down, kind of more at the implementation level. So first, you have to be a trusted service. So they do checks on the service that's actually calling these APIs. So there is a kind of partner level kind of agreement that needs to be made. But assuming that you are a trusted service, which Ahana is, let's say a user goes ahead and queries and I want, select star or whatever on transactions, a transactions table or a customers table. So the first thing that will happen is we would check Lake Formation for authorization for that principal. So whoever this user is, I know what IAM role that person is. I would check in Lake Formation, do you have that? If you have that, then I would get back the policies. I would say, okay, well, what does this user have access to? I would verify it against the query that's made. I'm also given from the API temporary credentials. So if I need to get objects from the S3, I will, if I'm going to work with data. I have to use those temporary credentials then to make the requests on the underlying data itself. So as I make requests to the underlying storage that I need to do my query, I would get it back because I have the appropriate temporary credentials, which is vetted. And then the engine will then enforce the policies and filter the results. So high level kind of how the integration works. And these APIs are now publicly available from AWS. So why do people want this? Lots of folks already have invested in their AWS stack. Lots of things already in Glue. People are already beginning to define policies there. In Ahana, at least, we've tried to make this very, very simple. I'll show you, basically, it's a few clicks for us to enable this. And then more importantly, I think folks just want to be able to have fine-grained access control. Lots of folks have many use cases that you want to control things at the role level. So that's why someone would at least select this option. Okay, so let's get to the good stuff. Let's show and not tell. So first, I'm just going to level set to kind of show you what I'm thinking about. So imagine I have two databases, sales and HR. In the sales database, I have transactions, credit card transactions, let's say. So I have, transaction number and credit card number, category amount. I have a customers table. We got some information about their first, last name, date of birth, things like that. And then I have another, let's say, fictitious table, employees under HR. So I work for some corporation. I have some employees. So let's see how we could possibly enforce some authorization using Lake Formation. So the first one, the obvious one, is let's say you're an admin. You should be able to do everything. So I'm going to go ahead and switch. I'm going to move my Zoom thing so I can actually type. So I'm going to log in as Annie, who is my admin. Go ahead and log in, authenticate. And then I can just show my catalogs. I'll see the Lake Formation one, which is labeled LF. I can go ahead and see what schemas I have in the Lake Formation catalog. And I should see everything, right? I see the HR schema, the sales schema, and then I can see what tables I have in the sales sales schema. Do a select star. Sorry, this thing is blocking me. Let me move it again. Select star from limit it. So nothing special here. I'm just showing you that I can see everything and do everything because the backing permission allows me to go ahead and do it. All right. So let's take another case. Let's say now instead of logging in as Annie, I will log in as Sally. And Sally, let's say, is a sales analyst. So, and let's say to do her job, Sally really just needs to forecast maybe revenue and really just needs the transactions table. So we have the transactions table. We can look at the table. We notice that there's credit card numbers. That's PII. So we will restrict sales analysts from seeing that particular column. So not only are we restricting the particular table, but we will go ahead and restrict the particular column, and in this case, the credit card number to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and log in instead of Annie as Sally. Go ahead and authenticate. And first, so I will have access to the Lake Formation. So let's just actually see the schemas that I have access to. So the first thing we should notice is I don't see HR. I only see sales. So you can see some of the authorization coming into play. And if I actually try to see the tables in the sales schema, I only see transactions. I do not see the employees table. So let's actually do the same query we had before, which should be saved here, where I do a select star. So notice that I'm denied. I actually can't do a select star because I only have privileges on some columns. So if I actually modify my query to only query the columns that I have access to, the query will work. And I can do my job because I have the amount, I have the date and time, I can query this, I can put it to a forecasting model, I can do aggregates on what our sales look like over the past month. There's a bunch of things I can do here. Okay. All right, so that's great. Now let's say I look at Wally, who's in our marketing department. And so Wally is responsible for growth and some of our outreach programs. And in fact, Wally is responsible for the Washington region. So our customers that are based in Washington. So we have customers, again, customers similar to transactions have a few columns that probably Wally doesn't really need actual things to. Maybe for outreach, he'll need the first name, last name, but maybe he just needs to do, I don't know, segmentation analysis or something and see kind of the demographic. So definitely let's assume that he doesn't really need first and last name and date of birth. But we might want to see the percentage of folks that live in certain zip codes. We can target campaigns there, whatever. And also, Wally is responsible for only Washington. So Wally, yes, he could probably filter out Washington, but let's say we want to be extra careful and say, you know what, Wally, you can only see your customers that you're responsible for. So I'll go ahead and log in as Wally. And again, I will see what schemas I have access to. And again, I should only have access to the sales schema, which I do. And now let's actually see the tables, right? So before Sally had transactions, Wally can only see customers. And now I can try to do a select star from the customers table. Customers. And I will also get a deny because I don't have access to actually all the columns, right? I got rid of the first name, the last name, and the date of birth. So now I can go ahead and do the query, and I should not get the columns, but notice I'm only return the results that have the state that's Washington. And this is part of the policy behind the scenes defined in Lake Formation, where you have a predicate that defines what the user can actually access. And then we can have another example where, let's say Wally has a colleague, Olivia. So she's also in the marketing department. And let's say she's responsible for Oregon. So she runs the exact same query that Wally runs, and she'll get a different result because she's only allowed to see entries in Oregon. So this is really the full example of kind of fine grain, right? We have restrictions on the database, we have restrictions on the table, we actually even have restrictions on the row. It's the row itself. And then the rest, I mean, I could, I'm just gonna keep track of time here. I want to be able to answer some questions. The rest, if I can do it, if the questions are sparse, but it's just going through that, right? You'll see if I log in with Harry, I can only see the employees. Hopefully by now you trust me that the policies actually do it. And then we actually could also deny folks. So folks that don't have any explicit authorization at all are denied completely. So it's definitely secure by default. Yes. Okay. So I see a question. Only one. So I have some time. So just review on the demo. What did you see? I basically showed all types of access. All access. Well, I can do no access if you believe me. Let me just to do Oscars. So if I do Oscar, and let me even try to just see the tables that I have. Let me try to just see the schemas that I have in Lake Formation. It's going to deny me completely because I have no access at all, and I'm not mapped to any role that allows me to have any access. So you have all access, no access, and then you know, I showed some examples of varying levels of access from database table, column only, column and row, things like that. So you can mix and match it, and you can define this centrally in Lake Formation. So not only can Presto leverage this, but any other tool that you want to use in the AWS ecosystem would also leverage the same policies. So you're really centrally defining very fine-grained permissions in a centralized place, and then all these other services within your stack can leverage those same policies. You don't have to redefine them. Okay, so I'll recap and then go to the questions. I see some questions. So at a high level, you know, AWS Lake Formation makes it easy to build secure data lakes, right? So days, not months. This includes the simplified security management, which we take advantage of. They also make it easy to discover and share data. And recently, Lake Formation has exposed integration patterns for trusted partners and services. We have leveraged this, and then we've made some extensions to Presto to integrate to the Lake Formation security, specifically around the fine-grained access control policies. I'm going to take a look at the questions since I'm pretty much done. Actually, one more thing. If you really want to know like the low-level details, we did present the developer on this, Jalpreet, along with Roy from Amazon, did present this at PrestoCon. So go ahead and like Dipti mentioned earlier, just get the link there and search for Lake Formation, and you'll find the talk. And they go much more deeper if you actually care more about the implementation. And so in terms of Q&A, when it lists the columns, it omits the columns I shouldn't see. Correct? That is correct, right? So if I went back here, right, and we're actually going to even make this simpler. But let's say I'm Sally, right? If I'm Sally, and I try to do a select star from the transactions table, right? It actually doesn't tell me. What did I do? I probably name it. Yeah, okay, I named it. I made a typo. So it only tells me the columns I have access to. It doesn't tell me the columns I'm denied. And actually, we are working on even making this simpler, where if you do a select star, we'll just automatically give you all the columns that you have access to. So you don't have to even worry about this. You'll only get access. You only see the ones that you have access to. How do we implement column level access? So again, we get the policies, and then we filter the result in our engine, right? So that's taken care of in the guts of the Presto, right? So we get the policy, we get the credentials. Some of it is actually already blocked from us, so we get temporary credentials to access only the data we need in S3. So you know, depending on how the data is laid out, we might not even get the data back, but we're responsible for filtering out the result back to the user. Let's see. How are you controlling the access to the database using? Yeah, so we don't control it. This is all in Lake Formation. So actually, I'm glad you asked that question. I have some backup slides. So if I go inside the Lake Formation console, right? So here's an example, right? So in the Lake Formation console, you can define the policy. I mean, you can do it via the CLI or the API as well. I've done it that way. But once you're in Lake Formation, you define a role. So in this case, a sales analyst, which is your principal, and you define what they can do. So here you can see that this policy is saying you can only see this database, this table, and then these columns within the table. And you can have multiple of these, and then you'll just get the union of the policies that you have when you do that. So that's how you control the access. So it's all, Presto is just leveraging the policy and making sure it's enforced. The policy itself is defined there. How is Ahana Presto managing the creation of users and groups? You can just create it in our app, basically. So if I go to the app, you can just go ahead and create a new user. That's it. And then you have your user and you have a password and you can authenticate. And we're constantly working on different ways and better ways to authenticate for our customers, but you just simply do it. We take care of the heavy lifting for you on that. See what else is there.
I think that might be all that's in right now, unless anyone else has an additional question.
Cool. And thanks for posting the PrestoCon link, Patricia.
My pleasure.
Make it easy.
No problem. Well, if you're ready to wrap, then I can support doing a little closing statement of thanks here, Wen. And
yeah, I'm good. Unless yeah, if there's no more questions. Thanks everyone for your time and attention. It was great to show some of the work that we've been up to.